Greetings and welcome to the latest event in the Gies College of Business Global Challenges in Business webinar series. I'm Amanda Brantner, Senior Associate Director for Learner Relations here at Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois, and I look forward to spending the next hour with you. Our faculty experts have developed a series of webinars to address some of the pressing issues business face today, from the economic impact of COVID-19 to cybersecurity and ethics. These webinars enable you to be better prepared to succeed and thrive through any number of challenges. Before we get started with brand marketing in the age of COVID-19 with Professors Mike Yao and Jan Slater, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items related to the Q&A portion of today's session. Please submit all of your questions via the Zoom Q&A feature. Your questions will be submitted publicly for the whole audience to see. In order to develop consensus around questions, please use upvoting. The upvote thumb is located next to the question in the Q&A window. While you can only upvote once, you can also reverse your votes. We'll bring the top questions to Professors Yao and Slater following the presentation. Any general housekeeping questions will be answered in text by the Gies team working in the background. Questions submitted via the chat will not be taken. It's my privilege to introduce today's presenters, Mike Yao and Jan Slater. Mike Yao is a professor of digital media and the head of the Charles H. Sandage Department of Advertising in the College of Media. He teaches a digital media and marketing course at Gies College of Business, and he is an expert on digitally mediated social behavior and human technology interaction. Mike is an associate editor of a flagship journal in communication research and an editorial board member of 2 media journals. Jan Slater is the Chief Marketing Officer for Gies College of Business and a professor of advertising in the Charles H. Sandage Department of Advertising at the University of Illinois. As the first CMO for Gies Business, her responsibility has been to develop and launch the Gies brand, as well as build and manage a centralized marketing and communications office. Before joining the Academy, Jan enjoyed a long, successful career as an advertising practitioner, working in private industry, as well as owning her own advertising agency. Please join me in welcoming Professors Mike Yao and Jan Slater. Now to launch our webinar. The world has been turned upside down because of COVID-19. Every day things change and it becomes more and more difficult and more taxing to realize the global scope and impact of this pandemic. Today, Jan and Mike are going to touch on a very small piece of this. We're going to talk about how COVID-19 has changed the game for brand marketing. All sorts of industries have suffered through this pandemic. Customers are out of work or working from home. Consumption has changed. Consumer habits and expectations have changed. Attitudes, attention spans, everything has changed. Advertising, messaging, budgets, media channels, all changed. And we're not going to return to the way it used to be. So all of this change will become permanent as marketers guide their brands into a new reality. And that's what Jan and Mike are going to talk to us about today. Jan and Mike, to kick things off, in general, what are your observations about marketing brands during this pandemic?
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, Mike. Mike and I are glad to be here today. You're right. I welcome everybody. I hope everybody is safe and healthy, no matter where you are joining us from today. Amanda's right. The world has turned upside down because of COVID. I mean, just like that, everything changed. And we've never had such an event that has actually touched so many pieces of our lives. Families have changed, businesses, governments, certainly institutions of education, and marketers have not been left out, and life will not be the same. But I want to remind people that brands have been through dire times before. If we even go back through the 1918 pandemic or the First World War or the bombing and attack on Pearl Harbor to national disasters, we went through a similar time in September 11th of 2001, and just recently in 2008 with the recession. So there's lots of times of upheaval that affect the trust in our economic systems. But marketers have really seen a big change this time because it affects simply everything: how we live, how we work, how we play, how we spend, how we shop, how we consume. So as Amanda said, things will change forever. We're not going back to a normal. We don't even know what a normal is going to be, nor do we know what it will look like. But I'll remind you that advertising is a $194 billion business. It is one of those businesses that is too big to fail. And so it's really easy to stop, kind of be paralyzed, and what do you do now, and put things on hold. But I'll tell you that in a slide I'm just going to show you, the impact of COVID on marketing has changed things, but it hasn't changed it as much as we think it will. So in this slide that you're going to see, you'll see that a lot of people changed staff. They pulled things back. 70% of advertising agencies changed their spending in the second quarter of 2020. 30% of people pulled their advertising, canceled their ads, actually, things that they had already put in the market. I'll tell you that on hold and being paralyzed doesn't help your brand, and in the long term, it won't help the economy. So we constantly have to work on what is happening with the user experiences, no matter whether it's good times or bad. This is what we talk about. This is how we advertise. We use those user experiences and the responses to those experiences to advertise. So what we've really been dealing with is changes in human behavior and those responses to those changes. So changes do provide us an opportunity. But what I want to talk about today, and what Mike and I are going to lead into, is there are some fundamentals of advertising and marketing of brands that just really are not going to change. Things like strategy, connection, trust, relevance. So my general observation that is, especially in time of uncertainty and upheaval, it's really critical that you already have done the hard work to understand the value of your brand, what it stands for, what is imperative, what is true about what you do. This is about what Mike and I call authenticity, aligning what you say to what you do. I know that sounds simple, but it really does take discipline. And we're going to talk about this more today. But I want to give you just an example, an observation of how one brand, if you will, give me some credit here, the Gies brand, managed through this time. So at Gies, we value innovation, access, and excellence. And we measure that and talk about that through business on purpose. What that means is that we are very intentional about what we do, how we deliver innovation, access, and excellence. And the other fact is that we provide our students more than just a great business education, and we offer our faculty and staff more than just a top business school to work in. We provide paths for people to find their passion that will make the world a better place. And how did we deliver on that during COVID? Well, we started these webinars for one. As Amanda said, we've been doing these since March. I think this is the 12th one. We've been harnessing the expertise of our faculty as to how it relates to COVID. As Amanda said, we've gone from economics to ethics to consumer behavior to supply chain. So thousands of participants have signed up, like several hundreds of you with us today, and engaged to learn from some of the best minds in the business. And that is about excellence, access, and innovation. We made this accessible. We used the excellent expertise of our faculty, and it was an innovative way to deliver content. The other thing that we had to do is think about how did we communicate with our own stakeholders. I think one of the most difficult things to do in a time of crisis or upheaval is to think about all of your stakeholders. Businesses oftentimes think about their employees and their consumers, and sometimes they think about their consumers more than they think about their employees. But if you really think hard about it, you need to talk to your employees first, because they're the ones that have the most contact with your external and internal stakeholders. So we put together all sorts of communication tactics so that we could keep informed what was happening day to day, and it was changing so rapidly on campus. So we would keep the faculty and staff and students informed of what was happening, how things were happening, and more importantly, how they could get help if they needed it. Whether it was a crisis in the classroom, it was a crisis of how to get technology, it was a crisis of content, or it was just a crisis that you couldn't get home after the COVID hit the campus. So communication became really critical. The other thing that we did is that more than 4 years ago, Gies disrupted the MBA market by putting a really innovative, high engagement online MBA in the market. We have an incredibly large and talented e-learning staff, and that staff has helped our faculty design this enormous content for online learners. And we deliver that content through our very popular I degrees, the IMBA, the IMSA, and just recently the IMSM. When COVID hit, remote learning became the necessary norm. We used the power of our high engagement online content to help people who needed content, but they didn't have it online. We not only offered our content that we had to other business schools to allow their students to have the content that they probably couldn't get access to quick enough. We offered our e-learning resources to our campuses, to our campus and to other business schools across the country to help them give them best practice of how to teach online, because we were moving from in-person classes to online classes in a week. And that is really important, to use your resources, again, for the better good. So we were using innovation, how we already developed content, and providing that content and our resources of expertise to make accessible to others. And lastly, what we did is we really looked for the stories about our students and faculty and staff that were positively impacting their communities based on COVID. That impact is what really showed business on purpose in action. People were doing more than their jobs. They were putting their passions to work for others to make things better. All of these things were authentic, demonstrating our messages that matched our actions. So we were really being true to the Gies brand. And I think that's the observation I have for this entire conversation, is that you have to be true to the brand and you have to continue your authenticity. Our efforts here built a great sense of pride amongst our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni. More importantly, it built some much needed awareness and something that was just kind of a residual of it for the students that were in the pipeline, looking at our online programs, looking at coming to campus in the fall for residential or undergraduate or residential grad programs. And what it meant is that we actually had a record number of online applications for our fall cohort, and our residential numbers stayed well ahead of what we anticipated we might lose because of the pandemic. So authenticity is a fundamental strategy that is always necessary. It's really critical, however, in difficult times. So Mike, I know you're going to want to talk about this more, but what are your observations? I know you're working on some really interesting research that's evolved from this whole situation.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure being here. What a relevant topic. I think COVID-19, as Amanda and Jen has already mentioned, that COVID-19 really has changed almost everything. But let's keep in mind that a lot of things have already been changing. I mean, the entire digital media ecosystem, the industry of marketing, brand communication, and advertising have been facing this disruption from the technological end, the social media platforms, the impact of the business model, the cord cutting, and changes in consumers' behavior, media consumption behavior. But COVID-19 really accelerated all this disruption and brought everything together almost to it's a perfect storm. You know, I always mention that the COVID-19 is the last drop in that bucket that really pushed the bound. I mean, push everything over the edge, right? So in this situation, I think what you mentioned is a key word, Jen, is the word authenticity. How do you stay true to your brand? How do you stay authentic in this situation where you're going to hear people talking about your brand everywhere? It's going to be, you're facing in situation, business decisions that's changing every day. Decisions on whether to open your business, close your business. Do you want to require people to wear masks? Do you not wear dresses? For bigger brands, everything you say or do actually has an impact. So really what I wanted to talk about today briefly and share my observation from the media management and strategy side of things is really about how do we stay true as a brand in this constant changing environment. People are stressed out, they're looking to big brands for some guidance, and people are reacting constantly to every little decisions the business is doing. So in this kind of environment, the temptation to kind of react to moment to moment, react to the situation, to react to changes in the environment and thinking everything is unprecedented, that urge, that sentiment may actually create some problems down the road. And I think it's all that important for brands and businesses to reevaluate and to take a closer look at themselves. This is the moment for brands to really say what we are, who we want to be, who we strive to be, and in this environment, because everything outside is changing, then it's a moment for us to examine the brand, the authenticity of the brand, the identity of the brand, the personality of the brand, the reputation of the brand, and it's very important. So I want to spend a few minutes going through a couple of just observations and thoughts to the audience. And I'm not going to dive deep into some of the research that we're doing, but I'm going to use some data to illustrate the point that I wanted to make. As an industry, marketing are very good, and advertising are very good at doing things, planning for growth, right? These are, if we look at this quadrant on the screen, these two quadrants represent areas where marketing communication, brand communication, advertising do very well. On the upper right-hand corner, these are events that that's coming, right? You're releasing a report, you're launching a new product, you're doing things, and these are innovative programs. So what you wanted to do is to plan your communication around these predictable opportunities for growth. So promotional, you're planning for growth, the target, the objective, the goals are very clear. In the lower corner, left corner, these are negative things that may impact your brand, but you have to react on the fly, unplanned. These are crisis communication, and these are public relations, issuing statements, reacting to these events as we go. These two quadrants on this diagram are actually very mature. Marketers, advertisers have been doing this for a long time. We know what to do. But the changing digital media ecosystem in the COVID-19 situation forced us to start thinking about the longer term, the kind of things that, well, what do we do? Now there is a situation that nobody had anticipated. Can we do something? Can we use the media landscape and manage our brand in a more proactive way? Can we predict to say, well, before, in anticipation for some uncertain but likely negative events coming your way, can you proactively plan your communication around it to boost your brand's reputation ahead? So the analogy I use is to brand immunity, right? To build some wellness and immunity around it. On the other hand, there are some unpredictable opportunities that also come your way. So Jan mentioned the Gies and an IMBA program, innovative MBA program. This was a disruptive program that's really changing. But COVID-19, in a sense, it created a new need for these online content. right? So here's a situation that naturally the authenticity of the brand shows that the brand and the business can now step into this because it's natural. Here's an opportunity. But these are situations that you need to generate very quick, responsive, reactive communication to capture these unforeseen moments. So these two quadrants represent opportunities that the new digital media system, ecosystem, the social media, the gravity, and then the velocity of this information. You send something, one social media event can create a new opportunity, or one social media event can actually hurt your brand for a long term, in the long run. What do we do? How do we stay true? How do we stay authentic? Here's an example, just pulled some data off of a project that I've been working on. So this is just again, just set up. These are 3 simple signals from the social media data that we collected about, let's say, Starbucks in this case. So I just pulled some data out of the system to illustrate a point I'm trying to make. As you can see, the gray, the gray data line represents the sentiment, daily sentiment of whether people are talking positively about your brand or negatively about your brand. The red orange line represents the 20-day moving average of that sentiment. So it's not as sensitive. And the light green bar on this screen represents the total volume of social media postings about your brand organically, right? So if you can see that you immediately we see from May to August, we start to see these very interesting, and this is a pattern that we found all the time, that when the volume spike, it's really the negative sentiment that's driving these volumes. So when the majority of the public, you have the average, people are talking about your brand, these are loyal customers, and establish a baseline. But whenever you see these type of spikes, these spikes are not events that are planned. These are things that you're forced to make choices and business decisions on the fly, but it has an impact on your brand's reputation. And oftentimes these are negative, because when a lot of people start talking in this crisis, COVID-19, things become negative. You can see, for example, here, this is a spike where Starbucks required customer to wear a mask. And then you can see that immediately these public react. So I don't want to dive too deep into this graph because this talk is not about Starbucks, but it really to illustrate that brand's reputation in this age of social and digital media, we need to take a different approach to think about brand reputation management and brand management in general. We cannot afford to evaluate things very quickly and on the fly, making very quick decisions, no matter how unstable, unpredictable the external environment is. A brand can take a wellness approach to kind of plan things ahead of time and look for these threats that's coming your way, using data, using predictive analytics, using and take advantage of the social media platforms. Right, the question, so I would advocate a wellness approach to look at brand's reputation, right? Asking questions instead of what is my brand looking now? What do I need to do tomorrow? Really think about, is your brand image healthy enough to sustain the impact of an unexpected shock? How do I boost that immunity? How quickly can your brand's reputation recover from the damage from a negative event? Is your brand community prepared for an unexpected growth opportunity or a forced change? Does your brand communication strategy have enough stamina to maintain the positive reputation? How much money or cost or budget you have to put into it to maintain that kind of positive reputation? So going back, and I want to end here with some, 3 really main points I wanted to drive. I know Jan already mentioned authenticity. I think really the only way to do this wellness approach rather than illness approach is very much like how we defend the virus using our own body's immune system. That is, you can't wait until the virus invades you and then suddenly say, now what do? I need to eat healthy, I need to exercise. There are things that you need to, in the age of digital and social media and intelligent and artificial intelligence and AI and all of those changing things during the period of COVID-19 that adds to this uncertainty, we need to be authentic. We need to be agile, meaning that we need to be open-minded about things, and we need to, but at the same time, stay authentic, and then at the end, be personal. So I want to end here. Just really, I mean, really look forward to having a conversation with Jen, and just as I think what you and I were talking about is just really kind of focus together, really converge on this idea of staying true, look, long term. What you mentioned really struck me, Jen, that we've been through this before. There are wars, there are pandemics, and those looking at these brands that survived for a long time, centuries, more than almost a century or more than a century, these are the brands that have developed a consistent identity, personality, and stick to it. And they don't waver. They are not opportunistic in a sense to capture these moment to moment event. And they have a much longer vision in terms of history and timeline. So I don't know if you agree with me on that. I mean, really love to hear your thoughts on this, Jen.
So, of course, Mike, I love the agility, authenticity, and personalization piece. I think those are critical elements of any brand. And I think that those are the things that can help you in good times as well as in bad times. And I think the reputation piece is really critical. I think sometimes people don't think about the reputation of the brand as much as they think about the benefits of the brand. But in my mind, a brand is a promise, and that reputation to me is part of that promise that we're always going to be here and we're going to deliver what we say we will to you at all times, no matter whether you're having a good year in the economy or you're having a bad year in the economy. So I think that those are really critical. I think the other piece of this is that, and I'd love to talk about how agility and authenticity work together. Because I think in a time of crisis, right, we think, oh my God, we have to do something. We have to do it. Oh, everything is happening. In the COVID, when it came really to campus, we had, like on a Friday, we sent out an email to faculty to say, you better be ready to go take your classes online, teach at least one of your classes online after spring break. 2 weeks later, we were online. It was not putting one class online, it was putting all of it. I think the other part of that is it was hard I just want to take the education system for a minute. It was hard for certain brands, educational brands, to make that move because that isn't how they deliver content. That isn't what they're good at. They are really good at in-person conversations, teaching, learning, experiential kinds of things. And what we all try to do in the education setting is build an experience. I think where Gies had an advantage there is we had already been in the online space for a long time and we knew how to do it. And so we had designed courses specifically to be online. We call it online by design. We thought about what the online learners wanted, what they needed, how they wanted to learn, what sort of information they know. Mike, you know what you teach in that program. So we were really looking at their needs, wants, and desires like any brand would do, and we built the program for those needs, wants, and desires. When other brands like Harvard or Yale or whomever had to automatically switch to what they called remote learning, that was not online learning. That was simply putting your lecture and your class in a Zoom call. And it wasn't about really constructing your lectures, constructing videos, constructing live sessions around what your brand really stood for. So I think there was a lot of brand reputation, and we saw it in the news, that was really harmed by that because I think they had to be agile, but they missed the authenticity of their brand. So they were quick to move to the Zoom, but they forgot to think about what was really important about their delivery and their content that they could bring to that. So I think it's really easy to move quickly when you have to be able to pay attention, you have to be able to pivot, but it doesn't mean that that this is a sprint, that you have to rush to get somewhere. You have to think about this. We're in this for the long haul, whether it's through this pandemic or the centuries that these brands have been around. So I think the other piece of that, it goes back to the authenticity, is that while you're having to be agile, maybe you had to cancel your ads, maybe you had to pull some ads, maybe you had to pull some and build some new messages. was really hard to build new advertisements when you couldn't be 6 feet, you had to be 6 feet away from people, and you had to be in mask, and you couldn't, put them in multiple places. So you had to rethink how you even did your messaging, right? And your messaging had to change. But it is about thinking about what is the instance, what is the consumer going through at this particular time, and what do they need from you? So you have to move at a faster pace. You have to be ready to pivot, but you don't have to like throw all caution to the wind. You have to come back to who you really are. And in all seriousness, nobody, while brands were being concerned, the consumers didn't really want people to stop advertising. They needed the advertisements for comfort because it's part of who we are. We wanted to see our brands make us feel better. It's that authenticity, it's that trust level that we have, that we use these brands, we engage with these brands, we experience these brands because it brings something other than just quenching my thirst or giving me a salty snack or making my face feel smoother. We use them for lots more reasons.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think being agile is not being a social chameleon. It's not to say the things or changing your identity all the time. And so what you mentioned is to find that balance of being agile but not inconsistent. And then that requires to think about who you really are. Again, the question that I often think about this is that in the age of digital and social media, regardless of even not just during COVID-19, but particularly during COVID-19, when things are inconsistent, is the knowledge about who you are, the confidence about who that person. I often use interpersonal relationship as a metaphor in brand management, brand communication, brand management, is that if you want to, if in a mass communication era, when you can have a ample time leeway to plan all of the messages and think about what you want to say, and then you have 3 or 4 different platforms to say it, it's relatively easy to craft and maintain that personality and then present it in a way. But in the age of social media, things happen so quickly, right? Everything you do, how frequently you post these things, and it represents who you are. It's things have become a lot more natural, and an interaction happens now and here. It doesn't give the brand a 2-week or 2-month or even 6-month window to think about it. And the reaction in terms of reputation comes very swiftly. And so I was just thinking, as you were mentioning, as you were talking about this, that reputation, of healthy reputation, is important for someone for a brand to be agile. Just think of an athlete that if we're running, if I'm not a runner, if I don't run all the time, if I'm not in a healthy condition, when something hits me, I may be able to be very agile and jump out of the way, but that jump may cost me sprain my ankle and I may not be able to move anymore. So knowing that I'm running a treacherous course, it's all that more important to say, well, because the impact of the social events and external environment to a brand's health and reputation and equity is happening very quickly, then it's important for the brand to really think about, say, well, am I in the top shape to be agile? Will my brand community, for those, my loyal customers, those who follow my brand, those who believe in my brand, and those who are on the fence about it, is in my community able to will jump on, would agree that the move I'm making, the decisions I'm making, and the agility will not cost me, and will not cost me to sprain my ankle down the road. So that's something that I think about agility is very important, that it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it, how frequently you say it, to whom you say it, and the entire strategy has to be integrated and from messaging all the way to the communication and channel, a communication channel.
And I think your example of the athlete is perfect, right? Because we stumble a lot. And here's the other good news, I think, about the authenticity is if you are authentic and transparent and honest and trustworthy, no matter what, I shouldn't say no matter, but in most cases, your consumers will be forgiving because you've been honest with them. I think one of the things we've seen in advertising just since March is there have been some stumbles, right? There have been some brands who maybe did some things that were insensitive or irrelevant. Relevance, of course, is a very important element, which goes back to the authenticity. But you need to they need to be relative to what the consumer is going through now. And I think, we have always put a human side to brands. They're really products, they're kind of intangible things, right? But we talk about brand personality and we talk about brand personas and we talk about all that. So we give brands human qualities, and we have to use that humanness, if you will, when we message to our consumers, because that's then again back to this kind of connectedness and relationship and this trust and how you build that reputation. I think the reputation has to align directly with the promise. And if you are separating your reputation management from your brand marketing, then I think you're in serious trouble, because they really do align, and you have to be thinking about how you're doing them at the same time and what you're doing on one side and what it affects. I think your point about the growth of social, and I know you do a lot of research in this area and you teach in this area too. The instantaneous part is really important to think about agility, right? Because everything's happening instantaneously, real time. But it also goes back to making sure that you can pivot without jumping, in and not being able to swim. So you still need that strategy, right? About what you're going to do, how you're going to think about this, how you're going to respond. How do you respond that aligns with your brand, and still then relates to your consumer? So, talk about that instantaneous piece of the social that sometimes causes people to jump to something that they shouldn't be into because they forgot about the strategy, they forgot about what was actually happening to the consumer, and they just needed an immediate response. And they thought, and social makes it so easy, right? It takes us a while to get something on television or streaming or whatever, but the social is, I can go and post on my Facebook page right now, or I can send a tweet, or I can do that. We've seen that happen. Talk about that immediacy and how that really relates back to what you need to be doing in strategy, strategically, to be thinking about that long term.
Oh, I completely agree. I think our tendency, that's what in the graph I showed earlier, if we look at a 20-day moving average versus the daily sentiment change, if we just use sentiment as a way to look at reputation, if any social media manager or brand manager start to monitor social media dashboards and react to these short-term spurs, it's very, very easy for a brand to get into that trap, to fall into that trap that you just mentioned. You're reacting to things, and that's inconsistent, that's out of character, because you're reacting to a swarm of negative or positive reaction. And then that discipline, state discipline, it goes into that being authentic piece that, people would talk about you. That's why I think a reputation side of things, in the mass media, mass communication era, brand personality and brand, the anthropomorphic, the human-like quality of brand is largely a metaphor, in a sense that this is how you want to present the image or personality in your messaging. In a social media era, it's really relationship, because brands are directly engaging with consumers, and consumers have the power. The power of consumers in the digital age is about, the brand can say or not say something, but the public will talk about you, whether you like it or not. And that is the essence of a reputation, in the sense that reputation is how other people see you. and the brand positioning and brand personality is how you want to present it. And when these two things are not aligned, that is when I said that's not being authentic anymore. So if that means something's wrong with the brand management. When you realize that no matter what I say, that my brand represents this value, this is what we do, and this is what we do. When that action is not being perceived and being understood and being correctly digested or understood by the consumers, they disagree with you, how they talk about you in the public domain versus how you want to create that brand, that's when problems start to happen. And then I think that's, going back to some of the example, the brands do get in trouble in the sense that if they, in the short run, start reacting to these little blips in the social media and start reacting to how other people talk about you. And I think in the interpersonal relationship, we use this FOPO, the fear of other people's opinion, right? And then I think some of the brands, particularly the brands that does not have a very strong sense of the identity and authenticity, will fall into that trap because you start reacting, and day to day, you're reacting to something. Every decision might be the right decision at that moment, but when you look at holistically over a period of time, you notice that these things, it's at the end, I mean, the research that I was doing, we start to notice that it doesn't matter the short-term impact of whether it's in a campaign or there's a response. Eventually, it's the loyal base of those who truly follow your brand and talk about it that matters the most. And that's goes back to the authenticity piece part of it. And then also being the personalizing or being personal, that whose relationship you care the most. And how do you want to balance that reputation, the authenticity, and being able to have those kind of conversations with the target consumer that really matters to you as a business, as a brand community, and then also what you really want to do. Right?
And if you do that social piece right, having people share your message, the good message that impacted them, that made them feel good, they'll do all the work for you, basically, right? If you do that correctly. So one of the things that I think is really important that people lose sight of, especially in a time when things are moving so rapidly, is that brands have always been dependent on our ability to anticipate and solve the needs of the consumers. Their needs and behaviors are changing all the time. It's just accelerated, right, in times like these, where they're forced to do something or they have to change for some specific reason. It just so happened that there was lots of that, right? The world was changing. It wasn't just one thing. So that kind of agility, that the strategy doesn't change because we've always been trying to adapt to their needs, wants, and desires and their behaviors. We just had to kind of do it quicker. So I wanted to talk a little bit about brands who maybe made this shift, and I've got a few videos I want to show, but think about like Kentucky Fried Chicken had just launched, right, a brand new campaign going back to one of their original taglines of finger licking good, which you don't let stay on the air very long when they're telling you to wash your hands and don't touch your face and all of those kinds of things. So they had to shift really quickly on something that was one of their kind of cornerstone messages, right? That the chicken was so great. But what they did is they shifted to contactless delivery, right? Which was something new. They had to figure that all out. But also, something you and I've talked about before is that really the whole point of Kentucky Fried Chicken is it's not fast food. It's not necessarily something you're going to eat in your car. You do have to have lots of napkins and stuff. And it really is a family kind of food where you get the bucket of chicken and all the stuff and you take it home and you sit it. And it doesn't matter that it's in cardboard. You're sitting around the table as a family. And so we've seen a lot more of that happen, I think, with Kentucky Fried Chicken than just being this kind of individual kind of thing. I think of Procter & Gamble and Unilever, the two companies that are predominantly dealing with personal hygiene products and disinfectants and soaps and all those kinds of things. The shift that they had to make just to keep their factories going, because they have factories all over the world and they were hit in China before most everybody else. So they not only had to make a shift to their business model and what they had to do in their factories, but they were still doing their distribution and trying to get everybody toilet paper and Dove soap and all of that kind of stuff. And they've done remarkably well, I think, in not just in their advertising and letting their consumers know like when their stuff is going to be in stock, where it's going to be in stock, how they're going through it, what sort of safety measures they're doing. And at the same time, both of these companies have donated millions of dollars of product to shelters and nursing homes and hospitals to make sure that they had all that. I mean, that's really being true to their brands, right? And doing that. I've got a few ads I just want to show, and then we can talk about how they kind of really worked with with this authenticity. And I think you'll see some personalization there too, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward.
This buds for the blues, the reds, and the warriors. This buds for the magic, the athletics, the giants, and the jazz. This buds for the trailblazers, the Braves, the Yankees, and the Angels. This buds for the home team.
The Budweiser one is really interesting because, of course, they shifted every penny that they were spending in sports because, of course, there was no sports. And, of course, Anheuser-Busch spends a lot of money in sports. But I thought that they really were true to their brand in that they were talking about team and how we could all become one team. And then they were talking about helping stadiums with doing blood drives and that sort of thing. And, of course, the Dove one is just a perfect piece of a public service announcement as well as a great authenticity about the brand. But Mike, I'm interested to know what you thought about the Frito-Lay one.
I love it. I think all three brands, in a sense, that struck me, the message, I mean, conversation we're having, it's really not about what brands say anymore. It's really about what brands do nowadays. And it's their action. So going back to that personification of a brand and embodiment of a brand, because it went from a brand, you see a brand being a logo, a name that you see on the packaging or in the supermarket, to a brand being a part of the community, being a citizen, being the transformation of companies, brands, being a part of the society, being a person, is quite literal now. I mean, legally speaking, and in the business world and in the way we do advertising, has always really borrowed that idea that companies are people, they're part of the community. But I'm seeing this, how remarkable it is to see that all of these brands look at their actions and not look at what they want to say, but to say, look what we're doing. And then through that action, linking it to their, identity, the core. And then, so that's the first observation I had. And it's not about brands, about people. And I think that
Right.
message, that tagline really struck me. And the other thing about this is they didn't really deviate from their core, because it's about historic. I mean, but Anheuser-Busch always had a presence in sports. So it's natural for them to say, we are not doing sports anymore, but look what we're doing. This is the sort of natural step. Imagine if they released a public service announcement, asked everybody to wash their hands, or Dove started to invest in sports.
Exactly.
And then that would not work well. And then I think, and then the Frito-Lay, in a sense that they played on that twist. I mean, it is still a food brand, but I think they're just saying, well, we don't have anything to say anymore, but in this particular case, look at what we're doing, and link it to their impact, positive social impact. So I think all three examples that you just showed really illustrates the point. And go back to last thought on this is going when you were talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken. Kentucky Fried Chicken is the tagline, the copy of Finger Licking Good. It was just a persuasive message. It's a catchy phrase. Deep down in its core, it's about family. So
That's right.
The authenticity piece of it is not necessarily change. That you can be agile and change your tagline, change your copy, but you cannot not be authentic in thinking about what the value associated with that brand is and what the core essence of the product, right? What differentiates Kentucky Fried Chicken from another fast food restaurant or a fast food brand? It is that family. It is the getting together. And during COVID-19, it is about people staying together and sharing that, it just may not be finger licking good, but it's good. And then I think that's really a very interesting example that you showed. Thanks, Jen.
I know Amanda wants us to get to questions, so I'll do that. But I showed the Frito-Lay one because it was really about reputation, right? Anheuser-Busch, you think about those products very easily and where they are. Dove, it's about soap and washing your hands. But Frito-Lay, they weren't showing any chips. They weren't showing any of their food products. And people don't think about them, I think, all the time as Frito-Lay. They think about them as Lay's or Fritos or Ruffles or whatever it is. They're eat Doritos, but they don't think about the company. So it was really a good brand reputation piece. So Amanda, I know you've been waiting for us to jump to you, so we'll go to you.
No problem. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Mike. Definitely want to spend the last few minutes here getting to some of our audience Q&A. So going to try to bring a few of our questions together. You've talked a lot about this, the importance of authenticity, agility, and personalization in branding and what we're doing in the marketing space. Given the uncertain environment, how can brands prepare for what comes next, right? How can they kind of, I'd say practice, flex those, exercise those muscles to ensure they're ready for what flies at them in the future? And Jan, I know you talked about it doesn't have to be an immediate reaction. You can take some time. We should be thoughtful. But what best practices are out there for brand managers, marketing professionals, organizations to really be practicing and thinking about how to be prepared to be agile, authentic, and personal in their reactions in the future?
Jen, if you're okay, I'll take this question and I'd like to hear your thoughts too. But I was thinking about preparedness. To me, preparedness is about maintain a healthy brand community. So often, I think more and more brands start using social media as a promotional piece. and advertising, but I do think that if we look back not that long ago when social media was primarily organic, not paid advertising, social media is the most effective way to gauge the temperature of your community, to your ability to mobilize your brand followers to do these things. So what I would say is just test temperature before you launch anything risky, and do a smaller kind of to look back and to say, in the past year, whenever you are making some changes, how does your brand community react? Is your brand community and your reputation in a as you said, well enough to say, now I'm ready to kind of change a position take a position. Let's say I'm going to launch a public service announcement about, let's say, wearing masks. Okay. For some brands, this could be a very risky move because it's politicized. But the thing is, how do you know that? You can't, before you launch it. So before you step into that kind of arena, think it carefully and do some small scale A/B testing. Launch something to see if your brand community is ready to mobilize. I would even argue small asks. Say, hey, share this post if you like it. That post may be very neutral. It doesn't really changes major brand position, but you can test to say how loyal and how healthy is your community. If they're willing to share this post, and then your next action, your promotional piece, may actually get the result you want.
Add to that, Amanda, I agree with Mike completely, but I do think you have to start thinking about, what are people going to want from my brand post-COVID? And we know we're going to be we might be wearing masks for another year. And as people start to come, even if we have a vaccine or an antibody, whatever it is, people are going to come out of this and they're still going to have some hesitancy. It's not just going to be, we're going to throw all caution to the wind and open everything up and we're all going to, go hug each other and not wash our hands anymore. So I think it to really anticipate what are my consumers going to need post-COVID? And Mike's right, you can do some testing around that, but you really do have to get in touch with again, what you're going to promote and what is going to be your position coming out of this. And I think the personalization piece, which we just talked about briefly through the social media, is there's great opportunity there to get feedback from what people want from you. And I think that's going to be really critical.
Thanks. I'm sensitive to the time, so I'm going to throw one more question out there and ask you to be brief in your responses so that we can wrap up by 2 o'clock. You showed some great examples of companies that really hit the mark in this time, right? Budweiser, Frito-Lay, Dove. Surely there are a few who have not hit the mark, right? Have maybe failed or fallen down a little bit. We don't have to talk about those specifically. But if someone has failed, if a brand isn't reacting well, can they get back on track? And what might be 1 or 2 steps they take to do so?
So I think a couple things that are going to be hard, and Mike can add this. I mean, I think the travel industry is going to have a really tough time coming back, but most of that isn't that they haven't stumbled. It's just going to be really tough. So they've got to think about other things that they can do. But I think the one group that I keep thinking of that may have not weathered this as well is the luxury car market. Jaguar has put out some kind of benign message, and BMW has done a clever little thing about this is the only curve they're interested in now is flattening it. And I think that you still have to come into why you buy a luxury car, and if you can afford a luxury car, I think the point of it now is it might be your only chance to get away and do something different. So I think they can come back, but again, some of those luxury brands are going to have a problem just because of the economy. But I think, again, it's testing how you did in this and asking your consumers how you can do better.
Thanks, Jan. I am going to, not to cut you off, Mike, but want to be sensitive to the time. We're on a 2 o'clock stop. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jan, for your time, for spending this time with all of us. Your insights are really great and helpful today. I also want to thank all of our participants for attending this webinar and bringing great questions to the table. We hope you gained some valuable knowledge, and we also invite you to join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, November 10th at 11 a.m. Central Time. Professor Aravinda Garamella will present how can artificial intelligence effectively augment human intelligence. We look forward to seeing you then and wish you a great day, great evening, and stay well.
Thank you very much.